It is 6:30. We're going to call the meeting to order. It's Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. Everyone has names in front of them now, so people can tell who we are. Should we start, though, for anyone that may not know some of the other members of this board? Can we start with you and just go around, please?
Sure. Ken Welch.
Neely Seward.
Curtis Lidstone.
Mark Tessier.
Gary Fredette.
Wendy Savory?
Kate Getz, Nan Dubin.
Mr. Shane.
Maureen Duchesne.
Thank you. And let's get to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda additions and deletions. We do have a request to add a letter from a Wallingford resident, from Lynn, that be read into the record. So I would like to put that after the approval of the minutes. And I believe that the letter I'm referencing, we've all received a copy of electronically through email.
I don't know what letter you're talking about. Which letter is that?
Letter from Lynn Edmonds. You will read it into the record, but that letter, it's been requested that we be sure that it's heard. Are there any other additions or deletions to this agenda?
Can I ask, before we, do we have to approve having that written into the, moved in?
I think we could agree by consensus that it should,
I guess my only question is the letter germane to removing someone from our checklist, or is it?
the letter is in reference to the meeting that was held on February 15th, 2023.
Okay.
I would say to the board that we will hear the letter, and it's my feeling in reading the letter that it would also require us to discuss afterwards whether or not there was an inadvertent violation of any law or statute, because that is alleged in the record, or in the letter, I should say. So that discussion will have to come after hearing the letter. That's the only addition or deletion that has come to my attention. Is there anything else from the board? All right. Then I would ask, are you all okay with that addition of putting that item after the approval of minutes in the agenda? Consensus by the board? Okay. Okay, then we will continue with item 3 on the agenda, which is approving the minutes of February 15th, 2023. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I've got a question. Did you recuse yourself in the meeting?
As the minutes show, yes.
I didn't see that in the minutes.
Minutes state you abstained, not recused
She
yourself.
would be recused. What was the reason for that?
Why did I recuse myself from any vote? As the chairperson, I'm not required to vote, except in the case of a tie.
Okay, so it wasn't to do with employment. It was as chair, okay. Because I have the same employment situation as you.
I understand. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes, which is what we need on the table to discuss them?
Make the motion.
Thank you. Gary's made the motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion of the minutes as presented?
Somewhere I thought I read that you had abstained and not recused yourself.
On the back side.
Oh, under the list here, it says you abstained.
Mm-hmm.
Did you recuse yourself?
I recused myself from any vote earlier on in the minutes.
The roll call states you abstained. So which is it?
I did not vote.
There's a big difference between a recusal and an abstention.
Could you explain that to me, because I don't
Yep,
understand.
a recusal, if she recuses herself at any point during the meeting, she immediately has to stop running the meeting, can't take any part in the meeting at that point.
So she's.
If she abstains,
Abstain from voting?
it's just abstaining from voting.
So is there another technicality that she shouldn't have been running the meeting? Is that
Correct.
what's on the floor here, whether she should be running the meeting or not?
If she claims that she's recusing herself from any statements, she then takes herself completely out of the picture. And any board member can question her as to why she's asking to be recused. That's in the state statutes.
Does it say that she could not run this meeting this week?
No,
No.
she can run, we're just talking about how it should be
So I
worded in
say,
the minutes.
I think that we should amend those minutes to say that she abstained from voting. That's what she did, and that's what it states in there that she did, right? She abstained from voting.
What I have says recusing.
It appears in two spots. It appears where I said I would be recusing myself from any vote, which is after being nominated and elected as chair. So I'm not sure if that abstention is actually something that I stated, or if that was just to indicate that I did not vote.
So is there any problem in changing that to you meant abstain?
As far as I'm concerned, you can strike that entire sentence. Chair Savory also said she would be recusing herself from the vote. I'm not sure it's worth.
I would go along with Curtis and say that I just changed that to abstained.
Okay, so the suggestion on the floor here to amend the minutes so that it says after board members absent, and then that first paragraph, after calling the meeting to order and being elected as chair, Chair Savory also said she would be abstaining from any vote.
Correct, that's what I think would be correct. I'll then make that motion that you change it to that.
So with that amendment to the minutes, is there further discussion about the minutes in front of us? Those in favor of accepting the minutes of February 15th, 2023 with the change that has been noted, so that the reading now says Chair Savory also said she would be abstaining from any vote. Okay, all in favor of adopting those minutes, please show of hands, because being kind of quiet. Okay. All right, that motion carries. The minutes are adopted with that correction. Now we are at the point that I suggested, where we have a letter to the board. This letter came first as an email on Monday, February 27th, at least to my inbox. And do you care to read the letter yourself, Mr. Edmonds?
My intent was to have all of you read this and put it into, as an attachment to the meetings. I'm perfectly happy to read it for you if you desire, but if you've already read it, it's up to you. as long as it's in the record, I'm okay with that. Either which way you want.
Are we going to be discussing this letter?
I think we should, so I think we'd
I'd
like to have it read. Please.
Why the BCA hearing of February 15th, 2023 was out of control. Dear board members, my remarks are given with the expressed intention they be placed into public record for the purpose of bringing due process to the hearing to reconsider the removal of Bruce Moreton from Wallingford voter checklist, scheduled for March 2nd, 2023. Due process is one of the cornerstones of good governance, but it must be consistent in its application if it is to be fair. Allowing false witness to intrude is tantamount to mob rule. Thus, the need for sworn testimony, because validation of evidence is paramount. Due process did not happen on February 15th, 2023, and here are some of the reasons why. When I served as Justice of the Peace, grievances were filed with the town's BCA clerk. Then a hearing was scheduled where complainants gave sworn testimony under oath to the Board of Civil Authority. After which those testifying were dismissed until evidence could be validated and a decision was reached by deliberation. Only then was the grieving party notified in writing of the outcome. The records show I question the wisdom of taking public comments prior to testimony, mainly because I didn't wish to taint evidence with opinion, expecting the board would hear sworn testimony to gather evidence during the challenge portion of the hearing. I also felt I might want to speak at the conclusion of the testimony if I had anything relevant to contribute. However, the board was unwilling to accommodate my request to move public comments until after the voter challenge. But they were kind enough to allow for additional public comments to be taken after the challenge. But to my surprise, when the first round of public comments ended, the board took no sworn testimony. Indeed, they only relied on opinion and emotion from random public comments given by spectators and supporters of Mr. Fredette's challenge. At the beginning of public comments, Ken Fredette read a brief overview and history of his previous challenge, then turned over his paper or prepared statements to the clerk. Since when does a brief summary given as public comment suffice for sworn testimony of evidence? In his overview, Ken declared, as of February 13th, 2023, Bruce Moreton had not applied for any permits that would be necessary for converting his home from seasonal to year-round residency. But specifically, which permits does Ken refer to? And indeed, are any permits even required for the work Bruce is doing? Ken's blanket statement needs validation by the board if it is to be considered evidence. Sworn testimony and a thorough review of evidence is necessary. Yet after completing the challenge portion of the hearing, the board took no steps to validate evidence that should have been given under oath. Instead, they moved straight to a decision. The decision to remove Mr. Moreton from the checklist was premature and simply predicated on statements like no permits were pulled, implying they were in fact required in the first place. Whether or not the permits were necessary, the board must have assumed Mr. Moreton needed them because they didn't even bother to verify if that were the case. If there's any defense for the actions taken by this board, I believe it is that some were confused by two agendas, one being used to accomplish the other. Consequently, Some board members may have simply been caught up in all the hype and hysteria of a small group's determination to remove Bruce Moreton one way or another. Taking sworn testimony and then verifying evidence is what should have happened, but sadly neither was done, causing us to wonder why this hearing was allowed to get so far out of hand, or why spectators from out of town with ties to the Mill River Board were present. I think the best we can hope for, in retrospect, is to make this a teachable moment that instills the virtues of due process over a rush to judgment. Thank you.
So now I will say to the board that you're welcome to discuss this. We need to determine, in my opinion, whether or not there was in fact any inadvertent violation of any statute or law during the proceedings of the meeting, and if so, what?
Okay. Does any of the JPs have a copy of the JP's handbook? Okay. We all should have that. Have you read it?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So, if we go to page 12 in the JP's handbook, tells us how to challenge a voter. Okay? And it says, the first thing we should do, we can take testimony and everything. First thing we should do is the BCA must send the voter written notice questioning whether the voter still resides in town. Okay?
Check.
Now, that was done last year. It wasn't done this year. Okay? Last year, when that was done, the Secretary of State said you got to put him back on. You don't agree?
No, I don't agree.
No.
That's completely erroneous. If you're talking about the letter from Ms. Sink, that's completely,
No, I'm talking about after we did
I
that.
guess I didn't get that letter.
Well, you weren't a justice of the peace then. That was an email from Sandy. I'm sorry. That was an email from Julie that said, after discussion with the Secretary of State, I have no choice but to put him back on. And somewhere in here is that email, if I can find it. But so we did that, and that was settled last time. Now,
When was that settled? At that meeting? Because there's only been one meeting.
no, so what we did is we sent him a challenge letter. He sent the challenge letter back, he swore under oath, I am a resident of Wallingford, okay? Once he does that, we're done. Okay, that's the end of it. And I'll find that email.
Curtis, you're referring to the meeting that took place
Well,
March
the first time we
23rd,
started, no, well,
2022?
yeah, the first time we started playing this game.
In which the response to the challenge letter, because Mr. Moreton was not removed, he was issued a challenge letter at that time,
Correct.
and then he was placed back on as an active voter.
Well, he wasn't removed, he was put on as challenged.
Correct.
Correct.
He was not removed at
So,
that time.
on March 29th, 2022, we got a letter from town clerk. Hello, BCA members. Attached is the response I received from Mr. Moreton yesterday, which we have here. After conferring with the Secretary of State's office, as well as the statute, I am obliged to return his voter status to active as of today. So that issue is done, we're done. So now I guess we have a new inquiry that somebody is challenging him. We did not send him a challenge letter again,
No, we did not.
okay?
Did you read the minutes of the meeting that took place on February 15th, 2023?
those are here. You did not send him a challenge letter.
No?
We're required to send him a challenge letter.
Gonna allow someone else from the board to address this.
All right, it's
I
right here
would
in
like
your.
to address that a little bit, because based on an email that we got from the town clerk, she apparently wrote to somebody in the Secretary of State's office, Tammy Sink, who seems to be, a person who would know. So Tammy, the board all got the letter that Julie forwarded to us from Tammy Sink.
Well, this letter is before you were on the board that I'm referring to.
I understand that, but what I do know is
Well,
that,
it is important,
can I
Ken.
just say this? This is relevant, I believe.
I'm listening.
Because what Ms. Sink said is this: I would suggest pointing out to your BCA that because the voter had been added back to the checklist, when they removed the voter again, it would have been best to follow the procedures highlighted below and authorize you to send another challenge letter.
Okay, so you didn't follow procedure.
And that is not true.
Okay, well.
Okay, so here's.
Show me the law where it
So
says
let
that's not
me
true.
follow up with you on that. Okay, so the next thing I did when we received that from Julie with information from Tammy Sink saying when they removed the voter again. Now, you've just admitted the voter was never removed. He was moved from active to challenge, and you are still allowed to vote if you are a challenged voter, so he
Okay.
was never removed. So therefore, her suggestion that we need to send another BCA letter was premised on on inaccurate information. So I attempted to get to the bottom of it, and I wrote and said, thank you for this information, Julie. I have a question regarding the advice from Ms. Sink. Everyone on the board got this. She says, because the voter had been added back to the checklist, when they removed the voter again. I said, I was not aware that Mr. Moreton had been removed from the checklist back in March of '22. I thought the BCA voted to send a challenge letter, not to remove him from the checklist, and that he had been moved from active to challenged, meaning he was still able to, and in fact did vote in Wallingford. Was he removed from the checklist by a vote of the BCA back then? And this is clarifying for me because I was not on the board back then. Julie responded, just to me, saying, I'm reading it this way, when saying because the voter had been added back to the checklist in March of '22. So she's just straightening out the dates, '22, when they removed the voter again in February of 2023. So I wrote back to Julie and to this board and said, thank you for responding, Julie, but I still don't understand when Mr. Moreton was removed from the checklist, aside from after our last BCA meeting on February 15. Ms. Sink specifically says when they, and this is my comment to Julie, and by they I assume she's referring to the BCA, remove the voter again. What is she referring to? As far as I can ascertain, Mr. Moreton's removal from the Wallingford checklist can only be done by a vote of the BCA, and that has only happened one time. Am I missing something? Because I wasn't on the board, I didn't understand. Her response was, hi Nan, last year he was challenged by the BCA, which meant he's put in a challenge status. If he responds like he did last year, I put him back in active. If he didn't respond and doesn't vote going forward, I can remove his name after 2 general elections, which is 4 years, if we were to send him a challenge letter. But I don't see that it was resolved. It seems to me it was ongoing. We got a letter from Mr. Moreton, and you're saying that's the end of it, and I don't see how that's the end of it.
Okay, so have you read the Justice of the Peace Handbook?
Yes, I have.
Okay, if you look at page 13, all right, it talks about removing a voter from the checklist. And it says before, you must send a challenge letter, okay? Now, if the voter has voted or appeared to vote in an election after the notice was sent, has he?
Yes.
Okay, so he's done that.
Julie? Yes, voted here since then?
What timeline?
Did he vote in the last
I don't know, I
election?
heard a board member say, another board member say that he had voted, but he had voted in the last election?
I can't say, I'd have to look at his record.
I checked him in, so I know he voted.
Okay.
Okay, so let me start again. If the voter has voted or appeared to vote in an election after the notice was sent and has sworn on an affidavit of domicile that he resides at a specific legal address in town. We have that, right?
We have the
We
evidence.
have that.
Or has otherwise demonstrated eligibility to vote in town, his or her name must remain on the voter checklist.
And I contend he hasn't met neither of those. He hasn't proved, it. When he signed that saying he lived in town,
That-
he did not live in town, and he has not proved that he lived in
But
town.
that is not up to us to decide.
That's up to a judge,
Listen, it's very clear, what we have to do when we're making this decision.
Curtis?
And the only thing that we can do is send a challenge letter.
Read also the response that came from Mr. Moreton in regards to the challenge letter, because that was part of our discussion.
That
The
that
meeting.
does not matter.
I think it does.
Okay, show me where that matters in the law.
Show me where it doesn't matter in the law.
Okay.
I'm
Read it right here.
curious still as to what state statute we may have violated.
Yeah.
Okay, it's right here at 17 VSA 2150.
The voter has voted or appeared to
Okay.
vote in an election. So if he was never taken, if a challenge letter was issued, he responded saying, he filled out a challenge letter saying, no, I live in Wallingford, up on the end of Wallingford Pond Road. And so you're saying the
I'm not
BCA, or the BCA has to accept the fact that because he says he lived up there, you said it's over with.
I'm not saying that, that's what the law
No,
said.
that's what you told us.
No, that's what the law said.
You said that's what the law said.
Okay, so, but we have to go by the law. We can't say, I feel, or I think, or
Curtis,
whatever.
When you refer to VSA 2150, have you looked at D4? Because part of what came back in response to the challenge letter
Yeah.
was in fact confirmation in
No,
writing
but
that
when
the
we go
person was
back
not living in
here, when we go
Wallingford.
back here, it doesn't say, we're not talking about a letter we wrote, okay?
It was
we're talking
confirmation
about-
from the challenged voter.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You gotta look at what the rules say,
I'm looking at what the rules say.
okay? I don't think you are, because it says all he has to do, very clearly, the voter has voted or appeared to vote in an election after the notice was sent, and has sworn an affidavit of domicile, that he resides at a specific legal address in town. He has done that. It doesn't say if the board doesn't believe him. It says his or her name must remain on the voter checklist.
Recommendation?
But everybody should have read these rules, and you should have them before you make a decision.
I'm wondering
on
why
voting.
you didn't read the response to the challenge of the school board residency letter, though, and consider that, which
Said that he lived
was
in
submitted by
I
Mr.
have
Moreton,
read that.
where he
But
mentions
if you look
multiple
at the
times that he's
rules-
living in
Okay, now
Rutland's.
hang on again. If you look at the rules, we don't take that into consideration. I'll read it again,
You've read one part of that rule.
okay?
The pets that you like.
So okay. Anybody else is welcome, prove me wrong.
No, I have a recommendation. My recommendation is that the Board of Civil Authority keep Mr. Morton off the checklist.
We are
Let
in the
him
middle-
challenge it, and let a Superior Court judge, who probably has a little more knowledge of law than Curtis does, or that does have the authority to do that, let him make the decision, because I think we can kick
Yeah, right now we
can
are-
kick this can down the road forever.
We received a letter from the Secretary of State that states if we go to court, we are more than likely going to lose.
No, she was basically.
We didn't get that.
I'm going to call everyone back to the
I was speaking,
place at hand,
Let's just calm down and
which
think
is to
about.
consider the letter and decide, what is the opinion of this board? Was there any inadvertent violation of any statute?
Yes, you gotta follow the rules.
Without following the rules, according to the Secretary of State of the State of Vermont, we violated the statute by not sending him another challenge letter for 2023.
But I disagree because
But it's the Secretary of State has told us
it's
that.
her letter, that's what I'm quoting to you. This is from Ms. Sink, from the Secretary of State's office, who said, I would suggest pointing out to your BCA that because the voter had been added back to the checklist, when they removed the voter again, that she's basing this on misinformation. How many times has he been removed from this checklist? I really would love to know how many times Mr. Moreton has been removed from the Wallingford voter checklist. Julie, do you know the answer to that?
Once.
One time, last week or the week before. So she says the second time.
That doesn't matter.
She's been misinformed, so you can quote her all you want.
I'm
It
not-
doesn't matter?
Listen, hang on.
Okay.
She just.
I am not quoting the Secretary of State. I'm quoting the JP's handbook. I'm quoting the rules and the law, which we all should have in front of us right here. You can shake your head, Ken. It's right here, I've showed you.
No, I'm not Ken, I'm Gary.
I'm sorry, Gary, you can shake your head, but we gotta go by what the rules are. We can't make it up as we go along.
I think that because the original challenge, or because they didn't, I'm getting really confused here. He was never taken off the checklist. He was sent a challenge letter. That challenge letter is still the only challenge letter that's been issued to him. That we are, when the BCA met again, for the only time they met since they decided from the year before, that it's a continuation of the same challenge of whether he had residency in the town of Wallingford or not. And when it comes down to that challenge, the fact was that he doesn't have residency in the town of Wallingford, so that's what we were able to act on, because it wasn't put on and taken off and put back on. We had that original challenge letter that he was sent, that he responded to, and then when the BCA met the next time, which was a year later, when we had a chance to act upon that letter, that when he said that I'm living at the end of Wallingford Pond Road, and, but in his letter, he said he's lived in Rutland, and on his challenge letter, he said he lived in the Wallingford Pond Road. I think at that point in time, we're still dealing with the same letter. We're still dealing with the same program. So when we met, we said, okay, the action we can take upon that now is we can take him off the voters checklist because he hasn't lived in Wallingford for a year and a half and probably won't for another year.
Can you show me where the board has the authority to do that?
I will tell you right now.
Show me the
if you would
law.
like to know.
But where I have to prove that he's not living in Wallingford?
Doesn't have,
No, this is the.
that's not what we,
Curtis, this is the Vermont statutes, Title 17, Elections, Chapter 043, Qualification and Registration of Voters, Subchapter 002, Registration of Voters. And this, people can talk about whatever opinions might have influenced us. So I'm new to this board. So what I did was I read the response to the challenge. I read Mr. Moreton's letter, wherein he said, my moving to Rutland was not done surreptitiously. In fact, my friends know that I'm living in Rutland, and that I plan to move to camp full-time beginning in the fall. This letter is from 2022, so I'm assuming he means fall of 2022. So, based on that, the fact that he says he is living in Rutland, in print, Curtis,
okay,
the statutes say...
it's not print.
Excuse me, the statutes say, what, excuse me?
It's not print, it's the sworn testimony we go by.
That wasn't sworn testimony.
This is the,
Right,
this is
you're
his
right, it
challenge letter.
wasn't sworn testimony. And the
Okay,
sworn
Curtis?
testimony, which is what we go by,
Would you let her finish her?
Sure.
Thank you.
I would just like to read the statute.
okay.
It says, if the voter confirms in writing that the voter has changed his or her residence to a place outside the area covered by the checklist, which is, I assume, his place in Rutland where he's been living for over a year is outside of that, the Board of Civil Authority shall remove the voter's name from the checklist. I do not see why you think we didn't have to do this
Okay.
when we have no proof that the person in question lives in our town or has lived in our town for over a year.
Well, once again, we'll go back to the rules, which you should have.
She's
Read
in the
more
rules
about
It
also.
says, we have to, the only thing we can do as a board, it doesn't say anywhere to vote him off. We have that authority. It says the BCA must send the voter a written notice.
That's
Okay.
not what I'm talking about, and of course it is in here
Okay,
that the
but
BCA
you're-
does have that authority,
okay.
I'm just saying. It
But
says
then
that
we go Two, I'll read it one more time. Sworn affidavit of domicile. So you're taking something that he wrote that we don't look at for this in the law.
Okay, so you're saying you only are referring not to what he wrote, but just this piece?
That's all the law says that
That's
we
the only
look
legal
at.
document that we
This is-
have.
Okay, so this legal document that says his legal address, which has to be an E911 address or a physical description, is 2126 Wallingford Pond Road. That is what he has declared is his legal residence?
Yes.
Okay, so we have, you're saying that
I am reading to you out of the JP's handbook.
what I'm asking is, if this person sends a letter that's a sworn affidavit, we have to accept that as verifiable without any backup proof? That's what I'm asking. Is that what you're saying? we have to
Show
do?
me where it says different than that.
Well, somewhere it does say, and I'm just going to paraphrase now because I don't know exactly where it is, that they have to say that, and then they have to say that they intend to move back and have evidence to that effect, that they are moving back.
Well, it's both,
Okay,
and or. And I said it right here. The voter has voted in the election and has sworn an affidavit, he has to have voted, and he has to have sworn on an affidavit, or has otherwise demonstrated eligibility to vote in town. Now, if you go to the statute, I mean, that's really all we're looking at, what we can do. Now, if you want to talk about that, we have resident in VSA Title 17, VSA 2122. Says a resident shall be evidenced by an intent to maintain a principal dwelling place in the town indefinitely and to return there if temporarily absent, coupled with an act or acts,
Consistent with that intent.
yeah. So, that's not what we're looking at here.
The last paragraph in
That's
that, are we reading the same
However, a
statute?
person shall retain the ability, where are we?
You may keep reading, I would like you to read all the way to
If
the
a
last
person
sentence.
removes to another town with the intention of remaining there indefinitely, that person shall be considered to have lost residence in town. Okay, so,
Please continue.
okay. Lost residence in the town in which the person originally resided, even though the person intends to return at some future time. However, the person shall retain the ability to vote in town of former residence for a period of 17 days after becoming a resident of a new town.
The last sentence.
Okay, so what you like,
Read the last
what
sentence.
you like is the person shall be considered to have lost residence in the town which he originally resided, even though he intends to return at some future time.
No, I don't feel like you've read the entire thing. Becoming
Well, would you
resident
like
of a
to read
new
it for me
town.
since I'm not doing it properly?
The last sentence of what you are reading, which is 17 Vermont VSA 2122, says a person may have only one residence at a given time.
Okay. So residence means, he can only be on one voter checklist. Okay, and all that, and the way we
That's what
determine.
residence means? That's the definition?
Okay,
of residence?
what's your definition?
I don't know, but
It says a
seems like
principal
pretty
dwelling
simple.
place.
Okay, with an intent. Mr. Moreton says he has the intent. Okay? It doesn't say how long intent, it does not specify what in the period of intent. Okay? So, but this isn't what we're talking about.
No, in fact, we're not even on the agenda item
Yeah.
for this.
We gotta do things according to the book, and we gotta send him a challenge letter, that's the first step.
no, I disagree. Tell me why you say we need to send a challenge letter again?
Curtis, can I just interject here for a minute or so?
Absolutely.
At our last meeting, Ken Fredetz stood up with a letter that she read. And in that letter, it stated that Bruce Moreton lived in Wallingford from April to November. That establishes his residency in this town.
Till he moved out, right?
You only have to live in a town 183 days to establish residency. So are you telling us that anybody that goes away for winters no longer can be on our voter checklist? Because we have a lot in this town that do.
Okay, well, here's what I'm gonna say.
If he's lived here 7 months, he's a resident of town.
I think we should follow the rules. I think we should not make it up as we go along. I think we should do what it is. If you guys still, if everybody wants to vote to remove him from the checklist, there's gonna be a lawsuit.
As a point of order, we are
haven't done it
not even at
properly.
this spot in the agenda.
Do we want to spend taxpayers' money defending this?
No.
Okay.
I don't want my tax money spent on foolishness that we know we're gonna lose.
Okay, so
Friends,
I'm done talking.
thank you. I am back at the letter that was read by Mr. Edmonds. I'm looking for an opinion from each person of this board as to whether or not there was any kind of inadvertent violation that occurred.
Yes, there was a violation.
There was a violation. We
failed-
didn't send
We
the,
didn't send a check letter, which we should have done.
I'd like to.
I dispute
Can I
that.
talk about the letter? Content of the letter, is that appropriate? If
I
it's, if it's a violation,
I would ask to figure out what exactly,
well, if the letter says that we violated things because of something, the way we did something, I want to make sure that that's true, that we did something wrong. And information he had in that letter, I don't believe to be correct. I believe there's some confusion, and I'd just like to try to point out what I think that confusion is, and the point that he made by allowing him to read that letter, if I may be allowed to.
yes, please.
Well, Mr. Edmonds stated that there was always, because he's been a past JP, and I've been past JP too, always in the past, we took testimony, we took sworn testimony, we went into deliberations, we gave a letter in response. I believe that Mr. Edmonds is confusing the Board of Abatement with the Board of Civil Authority, because I've sat on the Board of Civil Authority. We've never taken testimony on the Board of Civil Authority. We've never, nobody's ever, I know, raised their hand to give sworn statements that they lived there, and I can't ever remember giving a written response to that. So I wonder if maybe those two aren't confused. I know that he has his hands up there, and I think he should be able to respond to this when I'm done, I believe. So I find that really a little bit confusing. And the other thing that he has in his letters, as far as stating that he was concerned that we allowed people from out of town supposedly into the meeting to speak. Well, what we do here, and whether we allow Mr. Moreton to stay on the voter checklist and as a resident of Wallingford and represent the town of Wallingford in the Mill River School Board District, that has ramifications for the whole district, because we have somebody living in Rutland that's making decisions and making financial decisions for everyone within our district, not just the town of Wallingford. So the people that are here, that are from out of town, that live in the district, should be able to be here and state what they want to state. So for him to make that statement that they shouldn't be allowed to say anything here, that doesn't hold any water.
Can I?
When the board decided not to follow due process, and they did not send Mr. Moreton another challenge letter, the burden of proof was shifted from Mr. Moreton's shoulders to the challenger's shoulders. So in that event, I think sworn testimony and evidence, and deliberation on that evidence, and verification of that evidence is pertinent.
But that is not,
Well, this is a unique
hearing.
situation. I don't ever remember seeing us do a voter challenge just on the merits of one individual. It's always been done as a group. Every year you purge the checklist, you go through the thing. But if you don't follow due process, the burden of proof is back on your shoulders, not on Mr. Morton's shoulders.
May I ask you to
The
clarify?
fact that people from out of town are in the audience is predicated on, it looks to me like there are two agendas going on here. One is that there are some people who want Mr. Morton at any cost removed from the Mill River School Board. And they saw an opportunity to do that by removing him from the voter checklist in town. Now, that may or may not be the case, but boy, it sure looks like it.
And I'd like to respond to that, Lynn, because I'm really confused. You are a person that's gone to the front page forum and the letters to the editors, everything, concerned about outside concerns coming in to the town of Wallingford and telling them how we can do things and how we can spend their money and everything else. Yet you're okay with a person that doesn't live in the town of Wallingford making financial decisions that's gonna cost you money in your pocket. It is, because you're gonna pay taxes for school taxes, so he's making decisions for that, and you're willing to let that happen, but you won't let the state do that.
What I'm more concerned about tonight is you not following due process. And if I'm concerned about my wallet, it's just because you're not following due process. It's not because of people coming in from other towns. You can't, this is, either you follow the due process and do things the way they should. We can all live with how that comes out, but it's not, as soon as you don't, as soon as you refuse to follow that, the burden of proof is on you, and you will be sued, I'm sure.
Thank you for the letter.
Can I,
We need to move past this. Yes, Mark, I'm listening.
I wanted to make sure everybody understood why the Board of Civil Authority, why we ended up with this back in our lap again. The Select Board of the Town of Wallingford received a notification from, Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong, help me out here, but from the Secretary of State a few times, making the statement that if it continues the way it is, that the town of Wallingford more than likely will be sued and we will lose.
Since that meeting, with the state...
Since your meeting, the select board had another meeting, and we discussed it very in-depth and determined that the best place for this is back here to reconsider, because the town of Wallingford is not in a position to fight a lawsuit at this time.
Have we had any advice from our town's legal counsel or Mr. Morton's legal counsel? Have we had any communication with them?
I was called by Mr. Morton's.
You've had communication with Mr. Morton's lawyer? And
Okay, so-
can you share what that was? Did he threaten you? Did he tell you that he was gonna sue us?
Mostly, he was seeking what our next steps with the select board were gonna be, and I told him that the select board intended to request that we hold another BCA meeting.
All right, I would like to end this discussion and move past the discussion. This discussion has been surrounding the letter. There's no motion on the floor right now, just as an aside and a point of order. It sounds like this board is divided on whether or not there was any inadvertent violation that occurred. I chaired the meeting. I didn't find it to be a quasi-judicial process, which is what you're outlining when you discuss taking testimony. That's for tax grievances, that's the Board of Abatement. So I'd like to move past this, and there is item 4 that needs a motion.
I would like to make a motion that, one, we put Bruce Martin back on the voter checklist. Number 2, we send him a challenge letter. And number 3, we ask for the advice of a lawyer before we do anything else.
Excuse me, a motion to reconsider has to be...
The motion to reconsider cannot be made by you, Curtis. Are you looking at the agenda? Because the motion to reconsider is worded as such, reconsider, and that was the directive from the select board, that motion needs to come from someone that voted yes, in fact, on the date of March 15th.
The majority of the original motion.
I make that motion.
You would choose to make that motion? Okay. So the motion has been made by someone that was in that majority. Second can come from anyone.
Second.
Thank you. I heard 2 seconds. I want to, okay. Seconded by Ken, motion made by Stanley. Now, we may continue discussion on whether or not to reconsider. So I would like to just advise the board as chair that discussion will happen and a vote will happen around reconsideration. And at that point, if the vote is to reconsider, then the original motion from February 15th is what will be on the table for reconsideration. So is there further discussion on whether or not to reconsider the action on February 15th?
You mean, do we have other questions or comments? Okay, so what I'd like to know, I know that when the select board met, you went into executive session, so there's no way for us to know what the basis was for your decision to request that we take this up again. So if we could be enlightened about that, that would be good. I would like to know the board's rationale for its request that the BCA revisit this decision.
We just updated that. Our decision was that this board did not act correctly and did not send a challenge letter.
And that was based on what exactly?
It was based on the letters that Julie had received from the Secretary of State's office stating that
Frank, is that the letter you're talking about?
Letter from Tammy
We
Singh?
know there was misquoted. I understand where you're coming from, that they were never removed in the past.
I think that's
But-
sort of important, though, don't you?
Well, yes and no.
It's not important that she says,
No.
because the voter had
She
been added back.
misunderstood exactly what
So
was
what do you
being
think she
asked.
would have said if she knew that we've only, after a year, with that challenge letter open and no action taken, after a year, this new BCA met, picked up, continued with
We're not
this.
continuing.
We were, in fact, at our last meeting. It was all about the challenge letter from Mr. Moreton 1 year ago. So we were continuing that discussion, at the end of which we said, okay, now, since it's been a year, we vote to remove him from the checklist. So if Ms. Sink had been told that he'd only been removed once, and we sent one challenge letter, do you not think she might have changed what she said here? Because if you've made that decision based on her recommendation, which is based on faulty information, then I question whether that is really the correct
was
decision.
based on the fact that we had just removed the man off the voter checklist.
For the second time.
Okay,
That's not irrelevant
we're
here.
not getting anywhere. Could I now make another motion?
No.
No,
What do we do to
Are we ready for
move
the
on to
question?
this?
no. More discussion.
I
All right,
think,
we're still discussing reconsidering the action. That's the motion on the floor.
I don't think, sorry, Gary, go ahead.
No, you're in.
I don't think the Secretary of State's, the office, would have changed. And let me explain, because what they're looking at is the challenge letter. The challenge letter is a year old, dated in 2022. They're saying that because the challenge letter is so old, it needs to have a new challenge letter issued in order to, and then reconsider taking the
That is
Speculation.
not, she
That's
didn't
something
say
you
that.
should-
She never mentioned that at
That's just something
all.
that's coming out of your head. There's nothing behind any of that. You're saying, this is what this lady up there was thinking.
So then tell us the
Different
law,
than her
Gary.
argument that.
Tell us the law.
I'm afraid that what happened is the select board was afraid because somebody said, we're gonna sue, that they said, we better take care of this. That's what I'm afraid of. I'm not afraid. We have money to defend ourselves.
Okay.
We have
That's the
insurance to
position we
back
should be
us up.
putting it.
But the thing that amazes me is this thing is so convoluted over a fact that I can't understand why Mr. Moreton even wants to, why he is not just willing to stand up and say, I haven't lived there for a year and a half, I'm probably not gonna be able to live there for another year. I probably shouldn't be, I'm not a resident of Wallingford, why are we doing all of this? It's
Because we gotta go by the law. That's why
Well,
we're
okay,
doing
Curtis,
it.
so the letter that Mr. Morton signed, and this is the one that he signed under oath, is that right? This was under oath? Okay, so it says here, he checked a box that says, I no longer live at the same address, which was Depot Street, I think, but still reside in Wallingford. Please change my address as below. And that is 2126 Wallingford Pond Road, is that right? So Mr. Morton is saying that he now lives at 2126 Wallingford Pond Road according to this affidavit that he signed?
I'd love to have a judge.
Is that what you take from this? Because how else can this be read?
Yes.
So if we were to drive out to 2126 Wallingford Pond Road, Mr. Morton would welcome us in to his home.
You can't drive out there because they don't plow the road.
Okay, but where is the law that we have
Says
to
it's-
do that? Where is the law? Tell me,
Well,
don't laugh at me.
What I'm saying
Tell me
is,
the rules.
are you saying that we should not question this, that we have no right as a
No,
board
I'm
of
not
civil?
saying that at all.
Well, then what are you
I'm
saying?
saying we gotta go by the
What does
rules.
the BTA make their decisions by? How do they make?
We
their
gotta follow this here, look, we gotta follow the law, we gotta follow.
And I also contend Mr. Morton has to follow the law by, when he fills out the
Yeah,
affidavit
okay.
saying he's living somewhere. That's why I think we should go ahead, keep him off the checklist. Let it challenge it, let it.
I'm not willing to squander taxpayers' money on.
That would be your vote.
that.
You're assuming that we would lose this.
I think
will lose this.
by, I
We've been
think by
told
all
that.
the things
You've been
that I've
told that
said.
based
The Secretary of State's office.
I
They've
know.
already
Saying
decided
that.
this at the Secretary of State.
Okay, what can we do to move beyond this?
We can call the question of reconsidering the action,
Can we do that?
yes, and then we will have the original motion back on the table, and then people may vote on that.
Okay,
So, are you ready for the question of whether or not it should be reconsidered?
yes.
Going to need to do
So this is number 4?
a voice, yeah. I think for this part, we could do a show of hands. Those in favor of reconsidering the action on 215 to remove Bruce Morton from the voter checklist, please indicate by raising your hand. Affirmative. 1, 2. Okay, and those opposed?
I didn't see all of them. I got
Okay. Keep your
Curtis,
hands up so
Mark.
you can roll call.
Ken, Kate. I'm gonna vote yes.
And those opposed? Thank you. So now that that motion carried, the original motion from the meeting on February 15th of this year, according to the minutes,
How did Mr. Seward vote? How did
voted in the affirmative.
Yes.
Sorry, we can pause. All set?
Yep.
Okay, the original motion from the minutes that you have adopted was a motion to remove Bruce Morton from the Wallingford voter checklist until such a time as he moves back to Wallingford. That is now the motion that we are reconsidering with our votes. So a vote in the affirmative is a vote to remove Bruce Morton from the Wallingford voter checklist. And a vote negatively is a vote to not do that. All those in favor of the motion, please put your hands in the air.
So there's the 2.
And those opposed? I would like to keep public comment brief. Is there any public comment? Yes.
Tony Masick, Bruce Moreton hasn't been at his house that I can tell, at the end of Wallingford Pond Road since sometime in September. I've been up there at least 12, probably 15 or 20 times. The gate's always been locked. There are no tire tracks past the gate. He is not there. And I would swear to that in court under oath.
Might I make another motion?
We are in public comment. I don't believe we've done any additions or deletions to this.
Is there a point where we can do that? Okay. I think we ought to find a way to send him a...
You can work on reconvening the board.
You have another comment?
Hi, Joan Latuka. I have to say that I find this, I'm not even sure what the word is. I guess I should have thought of that before I stood up. But it is incredibly discouraging that you all, who I'm sure have very, very full lives, and I have voted for many of you, or I did vote for many of you, are taking time out of your life to actually have to come here and really spend all of this time and energy discussing whether or not a person who does not live in our town should be a voter in our town. I mean, I really am, I'm just dismayed at the whole situation, as well as really discouraged and, well, I'll leave it at discouraged, that there really seems to be, I mean, I can't even understand why a person who doesn't live in our town would even feel the need to be on our school board and try to represent our town. He doesn't live here. He does, and I understand he said he doesn't live here, or wrote that he doesn't live here, and he has no connection to our school or our school district. I mean, he doesn't have family members attending any of the schools, but really the greatest point is he doesn't live here. And I really wish that somebody would err on the sense of common sense and say, and really, mostly, I hope that Mr. Moreton would err on this side of common sense and say, I don't live here. Obviously, he's very popular. If he moves back, he could run again for school board if that's important to him. But he doesn't live here. It doesn't make sense for him to represent our children in our schools. It really doesn't. And if it's your job to say that he's not a voter and that starts the process for him not to be a member of the school board, then I think you have to take responsibility for your role and actually make that change. I am curious to know all of the people that said they, you know, I'm curious to know why it's so important. We've heard from Curtis, but and from the Duchesnes, but I'm kind of wondering why it's so important to the rest of you that he not be removed from the voter checklist when he does not live here. Why would you, in no other place in our country, I don't think, do you vote where you don't reside?
Well,
that was just my comment. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the time and energy that you're trying to put into this.
I would like to respond to that,
Okay.
if I may. I don't disagree with you, but when we do things, we need to do them. The legislature has set forth laws and rules. There's a way to do that. If we're going to do something, we have to do it in the right way. A mistake was made with this vote. What I would like to do, we can't do it now, I would like to go through this and do this the proper way. And we've got rules to do that, so we need to have another meeting and send a challenge letter and go from there. So it's not about one way or another, it's that we have to do things the right way according to the rules, or else there will be a lawsuit and the town of Wallingford will have to, taxpayers will have to pay the money for us to defend a mistake. So let's just take a breath and go back and do things the right way.
Is there any other public comment? Yes.
Charles Gottlieb, Haven Hill Road, Wallingford. I think, without putting words in Ms. Latuka's mouth, the word would be ludicrous. And I don't mean the rapper. The only guy that should be suing this town is Dave Potter. Lost by 9 votes, he lost by 8 votes, he lost by 7 votes, and now we have somebody voting who doesn't live in town. How many votes did Dave lose by? Did Dave lose? This is ridiculous. This guy doesn't live in town. That's it. It's a moot point. The very idea that we're getting bullied because of a lawsuit. Send me the bill. I'll take care of the lawsuit. That's how strongly I feel about this. You know, I heard all this crap in the 2020 election from the far right, that the vote was rigged and everything. I said, that's crazy. That's crazy talk. And here in my own little town, I've got a guy that hasn't lived here in a year and a half voting. On what planet does that make any sense to anybody? And you're afraid of a lawsuit? Whoop-de-doo, what's it gonna cost? $500, $1,000? Honestly, send me the bill. If I sound a little put out, it's because I am.
There is no fear of a lawsuit, but we
You're in
need to.
public
Keep mentioning there will be a lawsuit, Curtis, so don't say there's no fear of a lawsuit.
If we do
I would
things the
entertain a
right
motion.
way, there is no
I
fear
make
of
a
a
motion,
lawsuit.
Wendy, we adjourn.
Thank you. Motion has been made by Maureen. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Wendy.
All right, Kate seconded. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.